Helter Skelter. Two words that defined one of the darkest and most infamous chapters in American criminal history. Two words that sold millions of books, shaped a sensational trial, and convinced the world it understood exactly what the Manson family was and why they killed. For nearly 6 decades, that has been the accepted narrative. And for a long time, I believed it too. Then I started asking different questions. I spent 3 years researching and writing my book, The Manson Family: More to the Story, because I believed the real truth was buried underneath that narrative. I discovered that before the verdicts, before the trials, before the arrests in Death Valley, and long before the killings in the summer swelter of 1969, they were just young people in a turbulent era, seekers, drifters, believers, drawn towards something that felt, in those early days, like the most beautiful thing they'd ever experienced. This podcast is that story. At year-end, Manson's group attended a party at a trippy, off-kilter house in Topanga Beach known as the Spiral Staircase, a Dutch colonial revival built sometime before 1930. Charlie then sweet-talked the occupant, a woman named Gina, to let them stay at the property. Gina knew the house would soon be condemned, and she agreed to let them squat there for a time. Gina was likely Georgina Brayton, who also used the alias Eugenia Marlowe. Brayton was the founder and leader of the Solar Lodge, a secret occult society established in 1965 and inspired by the teachings of Aleister Crowley and the Ordo Templi Orientis. The lodge eventually disbanded following a 1969 scandal involving the abuse of a 6-year-old child in what became known as the Boy in the Box case. Brayton, along with her husband and 6 other officers of the lodge, pled no contest and received probation. In the 1986 book, Manson in His Own Words, written by Newell Emmons and published by Grove Press, Manson claimed Gina was
pumped up about devil worship and other satanic activities.
That New Year's Eve, there were reportedly a number of known Satanists partying at the Spiral Staircase alongside Manson and the women. The house sat tucked into a low-lying hollow just behind the Raft Inn, wedged between Topanga Creek and the base of the canyon hills in a tangle of scrub and driftwood that locals had long since dubbed the Snake Pit, a name earned equally because of the rattlesnakes that threaded through its sandy floor and the shifty characters who passed through its doors. Built squarely in a flood basin, the house had suffered terribly over the decades from storm damage. Water runoff from the Pacific Coast Highway during coastal squalls funneled directly onto the property. After repeated flooding through the 1960s, the house had come unmoored from its foundation. A creek effectively ran through the ground floor, which was filled with sand. By the time Manson and his group discovered it, only the second floor was livable, accessible solely via the house's distinctive exterior spiral staircase, fixed to the rear of the building. Georgina Brayton was almost certainly a renter rather than the title owner. The entire Snake Pit parcel was owned by the Los Angeles Athletic Club, and by the 60s operated without formal written leases, simply collecting rent from whoever moved in. The spiral staircase sat at the end of a lane drifting down from the Pacific Coast Highway and is believed to have been originally built by press tycoon William Randolph Hearst, the subject of the film Citizen Kane, or one of his holding companies. Hearst also built small cottages at Topanga Beach for use by his movie star friends, and the nearby motor court, where his Hollywood circle would retreat during Prohibition for a late night of imbibing, became a favored coastal escape for the era's elite. The spiral staircase itself was reportedly used for a time as a dance hall and speakeasy during those same years. Those cabins first housed workers who built the Roosevelt Highway, aka the Pacific Coast Highway. Hearst's motor court at Topanga sat at the intersection of several worlds that rarely mingled elsewhere. The working ranchers of the Ringe and Adamson spreads in Malibu, the rodeo circuit performers who came down to compete and show off for locals, and the Hollywood set simultaneously mining the same cowboy culture for silent westerns filmed just up the canyon. Silent film cowboy star Tom Mix, who embodied all three of those worlds, reportedly held rodeos at the adjacent rodeo grounds specifically to entertain the real working cowboys from the Malibu ranches, giving Hearst's coastal property an air of authenticity that served both as genuine ranching community and as a kind of living backlot for the Western film industry's golden age. The Depression, however, hit Hearst hard, and by 1938 he sold the land to the Los Angeles Athletic Club. By late 1967, the starlets and speculators had long since come and gone, and the spiral staircase house had faded considerably from its former glory. The area of Topanga Beach by then attracted a rather different crowd. Beach bums and vagrants frequented the area, as did those deep in the drug subculture. The spiral staircase was well known to local police as a hangout and likely drug den. In January 1968, Manson and the women initially stayed at the home, but outside in the black bus. Once they woke to police dogs sniffing around, looking for narcotics. Eventually they moved into the house, settling in on the second floor. At that time, Susan placed a call to Ella Jo, telling her to come join them. Ella Jo then hitched a ride to L.A. Ella Jo Bailey was born January 1st, 1947, in Holland, Michigan. With blonde, curly hair and a shy, enigmatic smile, she bore a passing resemblance to Greta Garbo. Ella Jo would never be one of the most devout family members, but she was with the group for the next year and a half. Unwittingly, she also inspired the family's first killing. In early January 1968, Charlie met two young men. One was Bruce McMillan Davis, born in Monroe, Louisiana in 1942, who crossed paths with Manson in Topanga Canyon not long after an arrest outside a Malibu liquor store on a drug charge. His first glimpse of Charlie was anything but ordinary. Manson was holding court in an outdoor bathtub, surrounded by a half-dozen young women tending to his every need. For Davis, the girls and the drugs were reason enough to stay. Davis, who was 24, relocated to California in '62 after attending college in Tennessee. By '68, Bruce had dropped out and was wandering around trying to find himself. A year before he met Manson, he got locked up for marijuana possession. He spent 10 days in lockup only to have the charges dismissed. He claimed that he'd been innocent, and the experience in jail made him incredibly angry. He later told a parole board that,
I made a decision that I would never expend the energy to support a system that put me in jail like that.
predisposed to believe the system was rigged against honest, hard-working men, it's easy to see why Davis found a kindred soul in Charles Manson. When they met, the two also had lengthy conversations about Scientology. Charlie also met Robert Bobby Beausoleil that same season. Beausoleil, aka Cupid, 23, was raised in Santa Barbara, the eldest of 5 children. Bobby was a self-taught musician who moved to Los Angeles as a teen. He and fellow musician Arthur Lee formed a music act, the Grassroots, and it is rumored that Love, Lee's next band, was named for Bobby, aka Cupid. In '67, Bobby moved to San Francisco and got involved with filmmaker Kenneth Anger. Their cinematic collaboration fell apart during filming of Lucifer Rising. Bobby played the lead role and took over soundtrack duties from Led Zeppelin guitarist Jimmy Page, who stepped down to focus on other priorities. Beausoleil was alleged to have absconded with the film score on his way out of the Bay. He fled back to Southern California and began a series of musical and personal meanderings. He met Manson at the Spiral Staircase while attempting to break into Hollywood's film industry.
The first time I met the Manson people was at the Spiral Staircase.
Bobby recalled in a 2000 interview for Feral House Publishing.
There was a party going on, people smoking pot and playing music. I sat down, I listened for a while, and I picked up this thing called a melodica. I picked it up and started improvising some counterpart melodies, which kind of blew everyone's mind. Maybe they were all loaded on acid.
Bobby was mercurial, mischievous, and gorgeous. He had many admirers, women and men alike. Bobby Beausoleil was never an official Manson family member until perhaps summer of 1969, and his friendship with Charlie didn't begin as competition, but maybe it ended as such. Bobby later acknowledged that he was molested at age 13 by an older man. Bruce Davis was also the victim of a sexual predator as a boy. It made both of them susceptible to the manipulations of a more experienced, more forceful man like Manson. Bruce Davis later told a 2004 parole board why he was drawn to someone like Charlie.
Attraction to what I saw as a powerful, talented person, a man.
Bobby was known as an eccentric dude, sometimes walking around Los Angeles with a falcon on his shoulder. The night they met, Bobby began bragging to Charlie about his music connections, including Frank Zappa. Beausoleil wasn't into tethering himself to a guru, but he did want to play music with Manson. A few days later, Charlie dropped in on Bobby, who was staying in Topanga with a fellow musician and chemist named Gary Hinman at a comfy two-story hillside house. Gary was welcoming, mild-mannered, and warm-hearted. According to various members of the family, Hinman was gay and may have been attracted to Bobby, but because he was shy, he was reticent to act on his feelings, so he simply became a dutiful friend, welcoming Bobby anytime he needed a place to stay. Later, his generosity extended to others in the family. Charlie met Hinman and dug him quite a bit. Gary was a versatile musician. Maybe he had industry contacts, Charlie surmised. Manson liked Hinman even more when he learned the chemist sometimes made mescaline in his basement. Plus, he had 2 cars and was willing to loan them to friends. Charlie made sure that Gary knew that he considered him a very dear friend. He also encouraged Mary and Sadie to cozy up to Hinman. That winter at a party at the Spiral Staircase, Lynn looked into a room full of people and spied a familiar face. "It's Dianne," she shouted. Charlie and the women warmly greeted Dianne Lake, daughter of the couple from the Hog Farm. Dianne, born December of '53 in Minnesota, joined her parents and siblings as they ventured west 2 years earlier. Her parents each sought enlightenment, but the Lakes eventually wound up living in a bread van before moving to Hog Farm. Dianne was molested as a child and very developed physically, often attracting the attention of older men. In fact, she got booted from the Hog Farm for having sex at 13 with adults, which might have put Wavy Gravy into legal jeopardy. Dianne's parents agreed to let her work for a Los Angeles couple as an au pair, and coincidentally, she stayed with that family in the fall of '67 at the Spiral Staircase. Now 14 years old and living with another couple in a polyamorous situation, she'd been in and out of communes and group sex situations for a year. She carried with her a letter signed by her parents, effectively emancipating the teen should she ever be questioned by law enforcement. Dianne wrote a 2017 memoir about her life in the family as the youngest member. In the book, Member of the Family, My Story of Charles Manson, Life Inside His Cult, and the Darkness That Ended the 60s, co-written by Deborah Herman and published by William Morrow, Dianne described her first meeting with Manson.
Charlie stood up and looked into my eyes so deeply and intimately that I almost turned away on instinct. Instead, I held his gaze and felt like he was looking into me. "So, this is our Dianne," he said, and pulled me to his chest in a hug so close I could feel his heartbeat. He held on for several seconds. I was used to the hippie hugs at the Hog Farm, but this felt warm and real. Tears welled up into my eyes as I took in his embrace. Charlie held me at arm's length, looked at me and said, "Oh, you're beautiful. I want to talk to you. I've been looking for you."
The women noted how juvenile Dianne was, not just in age but demeanor. She'd become a plaything for adults with tastes bordering on perversion, lost and voiceless in a world of debauchery. She looked very much a woman, but would later admit how confused she was and how desperately she wanted to please and be treated as an adult. Dianne brought out the maternal instincts in the gals, except initially Lynette.
Charlie knew that I was jealous of Dianne.
Frome wrote in her 2018 memoir, Reflection, from Peason Hall Press.
He finally stopped, looked me in the eyes, smiled, embraced me, shrugged, and said, "She's your sister." In that context, we women were a sisterhood, and Dianne had become one of us.
As Dianne wrote,
I had only my initial impressions of these women who would become my closest friends. I knew few facts about them. When I finally compared all the accounts of how each of us met Charlie, that I realized how similar all our stories were, perhaps with the exception of Susan. We'd all been isolated from our families and struggled to find out where we belonged.
Dianne particularly enjoyed Ella Jo.
She often faded into the background, but we shared a love of nature and quiet and often took walks together. Ella Jo Bailey appeared shy, but it was probably because she was overshadowed by Susan's big personality. She was a curly-haired blonde with a gentle smile and just a bit of sarcasm in her expression. Her blue eyes twinkled as she amused herself with observations she was too shy to share with the group. Although she stayed on the periphery of things, I enjoyed her playfulness and her open heart.
Thank you for listening to the Manson family. More to the story. In this podcast, we focus on peeling back the layers, one chapter at a time, in order to demystify the family and destroy the myths that leave us in the stone-cold dark. In our next episode, look at your game, girl. The family gets down to the business of daily life in the Los Angeles area, and we discover that Charles Manson's gift for getting people to do exactly what he wanted without ever actually asking them to do it was, in its own way, a work of art. What do you call it when manipulation is so elegant that the person being controlled feels completely free? This is H. Allegra Lansing. The story of the family and the murders of 1969 have always been more than a crime story. This is a human story, and there is an imperative to understand it, because the vulnerabilities that drew those young people into darkness are not unique to them. They belong to all of us. This podcast series is drawn from my book, The Manson Family, More to the Story, published by Story Stratosphere, and is based on historical records, contemporary reporting, and archival research. Citations for this episode can be found in the show notes. All writing and most narration by yours truly. Theme music is Masked by Silent Partner, with additional scoring from Echoes of Time by Kevin MacLeod.